On their 49th wedding anniversary, only one of their 4 children was sitting at the dining table. Thomas Whitmore was 79. Eleanor Whitmore was 76. They smiled politely, but the 3 empty chairs felt heavier than the cake in front of them. Michael arrived late with his wife, Olivia. He hugged his parents quickly and sat down. Daniel had texted, "Busy tonight." Lily said she had work. Grace promised she would come next weekend. Thomas cut the cake slowly, his hands slightly trembling, not from age but from memory. He remembered when this house felt too small for 4 loud children. Back then, the hallway echoed with running footsteps. Now, even the clock ticking on the wall sounded too loud. Recently, Daniel had started talking about moving out. Lily supported the idea. Grace stayed quiet. Michael, now married, spoke about space and privacy. And for the first time, Thomas and Eleanor felt something they had never felt before. Separation growing inside their own home. A week later, Daniel said it clearly at dinner. "Dad, I think it's time we divide the property properly. It will be easier for everyone." The words were calm, but they carried distance. Lily agreed softly. "We're not children anymore. We should have our own spaces." "It's normal." Grace lowered her eyes. Michael stayed silent while Olivia gently squeezed his hand under the table. Thomas didn't react immediately. He just nodded and looked at Eleanor. After 49 years of marriage, they didn't need words to understand each other. That night, instead of arguing, Thomas called everyone to the living room. His voice wasn't angry, it was steady. "If you all want separation," he said quietly, "then let's do it properly." The siblings exchanged surprised looks. They expected resistance, maybe even emotional pressure. But Thomas simply stood up, walked toward the old wooden cabinet, and pulled out a thick file they had never seen before. Thomas placed the file on the table slowly. "Before we talk about dividing anything," he said, "there are some things you should understand about this house." His voice was calm, but something in his eyes made everyone sit straighter. He opened the file. Inside were old documents, receipts, and handwritten notes going back nearly 30 years. "This house was almost lost once," he said quietly. "When Michael was sick at 8, and Daniel needed surgery at 12. The room went silent. Even Daniel's confident posture softened. They remembered those years, hospital visits, financial stress, but they had been too young to understand what their parents went through. Eleanor gently added, "Your father worked 2 jobs for 3 years. We nearly sold this place twice, but he refused. He said, 'My children will grow up together under one roof.'" Thomas closed the file and looked at each of them one by one. "You want separation because you think independence means distance. But this house was never about walls. It was about keeping you 4 together when life tried to pull us apart." Daniel cleared his throat. "Dad, we didn't know it was that serious." His voice had lost its earlier firmness. For the first time that evening, he wasn't speaking as the oldest son trying to lead. He was speaking as a child remembering. Michael leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. "I thought you both just didn't want to move," he admitted. "I didn't realize staying together was a decision you fought for." Sophia folded her hands quietly. "We're not trying to hurt anyone," she said softly. "We just thought maybe it's time to build our own spaces." Her eyes flickered toward Daniel's wife, who sat silently, sensing the shift in the room. Eleanor smiled gently. "Building your own space doesn't mean breaking the foundation," she said. "Marriage, independence, privacy, these are natural. But family doesn't weaken because someone gets married. It weakens when people stop showing up for each other." Thomas took a deep breath. "If you want separate entrances, we can renovate. If you want personal savings plans, we'll help you set them up. But don't let temporary discomfort convince you that separation is the only path forward." The room grew quiet, but this time it wasn't heavy. It felt thoughtful. Daniel glanced at his siblings, then at Sophia. For the first time, no one was arguing. They were listening. Sophia spoke carefully. "I never wanted to take Daniel away from his family," she said. "I just didn't want us to feel like guests in our own home." Her honesty softened something in everyone. Eleanor nodded. "Then let's make sure you don't," she replied warmly. "This house has space, not just physically but emotionally. We simply forgot to adjust as life changed." Michael leaned forward. "What if we renovate the garage into a small private suite for Daniel and Sophia? Separate entrance, their own living space, but still part of the same home." His voice carried excitement instead of frustration. Thomas looked at Eleanor, and she smiled back. It wasn't about control, it was about connection. A family doesn't stay together by force, Thomas said gently. It stays together because everyone chooses to protect it. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Maybe we were so focused on our independence that we forgot what we already have, she said softly. Not everyone grows up in a home where people actually care about staying connected. James exhaled slowly. He had been the loudest about moving out, the most certain that separation meant maturity. I thought leaving would prove I'm grown, he admitted. But maybe staying and contributing proves it more. Over the next few days, the house didn't feel tense anymore. It felt active, plans were drawn, budgets were discussed calmly. Daniel and Sophia worked with Michael on the garage renovation idea, turning it into something beautiful instead of something divisive. Eleanor watched her children measuring walls and laughing over small design disagreements. She squeezed Thomas's hand. We didn't keep them together, she whispered. They chose to stay together. That evening, as they all sat at the long wooden table, 6 plates, shared dishes in the center, something had shifted. No one felt trapped. No one felt ignored. The house wasn't just a building anymore. It was a decision. And for the first time in weeks, it felt whole again. The weeks that followed were filled with small, quiet joys. Weekend breakfasts became a ritual. Evenings were spent together in the garden, Eleanor teaching Lily how to plant flowers while Thomas showed James how to repair the old fence. Michael and Olivia hosted occasional movie nights in their private suite, but the family always gathered afterward in the living room. Laughter returned naturally, spilling from room to room like it once had decades ago. Daniel and Sophia occasionally joked about how stubborn they had been. We almost lost this, Sophia laughed, shaking her head. Daniel smiled. Almost, he agreed. But Mom and Dad reminded us what really matters. Eleanor stood by the window one evening, watching her children and grandchildren playing in the yard. She thought of the years of sacrifices, the patience, the quiet decisions, and felt a warmth that only comes from seeing love return. Thomas put his arm around Eleanor and whispered, Families aren't perfect, but they're ours. And sometimes keeping them together isn't about forcing them, it's about guiding them to remember who they are. The children laughed nearby, unaware of the full depth of their parents' wisdom. And in that moment, the Whitmore house felt like home again.